The space race is over, and I'll never get to the moon. By Schistosity. Read by My Lost and Found. Chapter 2. Sojourner. When Hunk was 6, he lay next to his mother in the grass on a warm night and looked at the stars. The ground was a little wet, with the dew nights always provided, but neither of them had minded. They were looking up. He remembered the way she held his hand and pointed his fingers towards the sky, slowly tracing constellations. She told him about Orion, Pegasus, and Hydra, and all the stories that came with them. He remembered, on this night in particular, she had pointed out the Little Dipper. Some people call it Ursa Minor, she said. The little bear. I can't see a bear, he said, a little sad. That's okay, sweetheart, his mom said. I don't see a bear either. I see a big saucepan. They had been lying there for almost an hour, staring up at the stars above the Garrett farm. Hunk liked the city, and he knew his mom did too, but he also knew now why she sometimes said she was jealous of her brother and his farm. They never saw skies like this in the city. Never. She pointed out more stars, drawing his attention to the big one at the end of the dipper's handle. It was not hard to see. It was big and bright, like it wanted to be seen. That's Polaris. She smiled when she said it. We call it the pole star. If you're clever, you can use it to find north. Stars can do that? Hunk asked, incredulous. His mother leaned over and planted a kiss on his forehead. Only if you know how to read 'em. Do you want me to teach you? She had begun to teach him, but he still had one more question. Have people ever seen it up close? No, his mom said. It's too far away. I'm gonna go, he mumbled. I'm gonna see it. I better teach you how to find it then, huh? So you don't get lost? His mother had laughed and wrapped him in a big hug. As Hunk got older, he found a passion for many things. Engineering, science, cooking, and all possible combinations of the three. But astronomy was always there too. It was no surprise to anyone he wanted to be an astronaut, least of all him. He met Lance in high school. Both being on track for the Garrison created an instant magnetism. Lance was a hot-headed loudmouth, and Hunk was his cool, sorta collected, straight man. They made quite a team. Hunk with his smarts and passion, and Lance with his big dreams only distinguishable from madness through the confidence with which he spouted them. He was 16 when the first manned mission to Kerberos was deemed a catastrophic failure, when the men were officially deemed MIA, for the time being. Lost in space. It was the first time Hunk felt scared about his future. I'm gonna do it anyway, Lance had said, from the Garrison's balcony, overlooking the starry skies of the Arizona desert. Hunk liked it out here, for that reason. The lack of light pollution seemed to open the sky up to its true form, bright and vast. This can't be over. I'm gonna finish what they started, see what they couldn't. But Hunk was scared. He was smart, sure. Able, yeah. But willing? He just didn't know anymore. He'd always loved the stars, always wanted to see them up close. But was he willing to die for that? Hunk looked up, eyes instinctively finding Polaris. He always looked for it, so he wouldn't feel lost. He felt a little lost, though. The three paladins walked casually as they could over to the exhibit, which was not very casually. Lance leaned up against the glass and started whistling. Lance, when has whistling ever looked casual? Hunk asked. Since now, my dude. Lance winked. I'm making it casual. Hunk rolled his eyes and peered into the exhibit. Revelation, or at least a part of it, was remarkably strange to look at. It was so familiar, and that was what made it all the more alien. Hunk didn't like it. He had become used to the sleek technology of the Alteans in his time here, so seeing golden, shining metal was just odd. What made it odder was that he knew where this thing had come from. The Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, where spacecraft were constructed, was only a couple of hours from where he grew up. And now they were both out here. It was an odd feeling, to feel so close to home, but yet so far from it. It looks like a panel from the main body, Pidge said. Maybe the bottom? Hunk looked closer. Emblazoned on the panel alongside the NASA logo were a string of serial numbers and government official seals from half a dozen countries. On top of being the farthest manned mission ever attempted, the Kerberos program had been one of the first fully collaborative space projects, featuring input from the United States, Japan, China, and several European nations. It shouldn't have been as jarring as it was for Hunk to see words in languages he recognized. The panel also had noticeably empty screw holes and broken seals along the edges. "I'd say the bottom," Hunk said. "And I'd also guess we were right about there being more of it somewhere else in the building." He pointed at the broken seal holes. "Someone's purposely removed this panel from the larger probe." Lance clicked his tongue. "All right, so it's probably here. Next step is finding the rest of it." The three of them stood in uncomfortable silence. "We could ask?" Hunk offered. "Ask what?" Lance retorted. "Hey, do you know where our probe is? We lost it. It's 6 meters wide and bright gold." Hunk turned to his right, where the alien woman and her child had moved on to looking at the next exhibit. "Hi," he said, waving a little awkwardly to catch the woman's attention. She looked at him, an eyebrow raised. "Sorry, I was wondering if you've seen any exhibits that look similar to this one." He pointed at Revelation. There was an awkward moment of silence before the girl pushed around her mother's leg and addressed Hunk. "There's a big one in the back." She pointed out the direction. "A couple more rooms from over here. You won't miss it. It's very big." Hunk heard Pidge mutter something to Lance behind him. "Thank you," Hunk said, and turned to leave. "It's cool, right?" The girl grinned. "Very cool," Hunk said with a smile. "I hope you enjoy it," the girl said, as her mother gave a cordial nod and tugged her away. Lance elbowed Hunk. "Let's go!" The three of them headed off in the direction of Revelation, passing exhibit after exhibit of spacecrafts, until they came to a larger, rectangular room near the back of the building. On either side of the room were large display cases sunk into the walls. In each sat a large piece of spacecraft, whether it be a shuttle cockpit, a warp engine, and even what looked like a Star Trek transporter. And it was here that they found it, in the fourth case on the right, with its long, haphazardly placed metallic arms, glinting solar panels, and maw-like satellite dish. Revelation was starkly different from the sleek tech they had become accustomed to in their time in space, but its scrappy design was instantly familiar. All three of them stood there for a moment, taking it in. "It's still like the fucking coolest," Lance said. "I hear that," Hunk agreed. Pidge walked up to the glass. "I'm gonna need to get into its control panel. It'll be on the underside, probably. But how are we gonna get in there?" "These things are like fine art to the Orions," Hunk said, absently tapping the glass with his finger. "There's no way they'd ever let us in there, let alone give us permission to take it apart." "But we're leaving tomorrow," Pidge mumbled. "We don't have time to bargain." "So we need to find a way to get into it," Lance said. "Tonight." Hunk's eyes went to the starry map used as a backing in the Revelations exhibit. All the exhibits had decorative backings, and Hunk was smart enough to know, somewhere in his brain, that this wasn't a map of Earth's sky, but something about Revelation, now a hair's breadth away, made him look anyway. His eyes did what they always did. They searched for the pole star. Of course, it wasn't there. It never was anymore, and neither were any of the others. Sirius, Rigel, Pidge. Hunk caught himself looking at the stars a lot, especially in the first weeks out there. While he used to be embarrassed about it, he wasn't anymore. Now, he was just sad. But something caught his eye. In the top right-hand corner of the backing was a slightly raised section. It was rectangular and protruded ever so slightly, only noticeable if you were looking straight at it.
Oh, guys,
Hunk said.
Guys, I found a way in.
It was an access door, big enough for all of them to get through.
Now, not to be a stick in the mud, he said, but I think we should tell the others what we're doing, in case we get in trouble.
Shiro? Pidge said. I don't know. He might not be too keen on jeopardizing a mission like this.
Then let's call someone who would be,
Lance said. When no one offered a name, he rolled his eyes.
Keith! Call Keith.
Hunk thought about it. Keith was a bit of an enigma at the best of times, and he couldn't say he had any solid guess on how Keith would react to the news of them finding an Earth probe, or their desire to dismantle it. However, it was better than calling Allura or Shiro, who would definitely say no. He called Keith. Keith!
Hi?
Keith's voice crackled on the other end of the line. Hunk launched right into it.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you some stuff, and you've got to promise to at least listen. Alright.
Hunk launched into a story of them finding Revelation. It was easy, actually, since Keith seemed to know a weird amount about the probe. Hunk explained how they thought it might have information about the ship that took Shiro and the Holtz, and could maybe help Pidge track down her dad. He didn't want to wax poetic in front of Keith, but he found himself doing it anyway.
And besides all that, this thing is like, it's kind of ours, you know? That's dumb sounding, but there's just something in me that wants to check it out and see what happened to it. Maybe recover the pictures it's taken. I mean, that's what it's for, right? Someone deserves to see what it's found, and... No, yeah, I agree.
Hunk was a little taken aback.
You do?
Yeah, Keith said.
That probe is important. I understand how you feel. Oh, cool.
Hunk didn't really know what to say. He had expected more protest.
Okay, so we're gonna try and find a way in tonight to see if we can open it up and remove its data storage. Don't tell Allura, maybe. She's not going to like this.
Fair, Keith said.
I'll keep quiet. Just be careful with it, okay? Will do, K-Dog. Don't call me K-Dog.
And then he was gone.
Well, we got Keith's blessing.
Hunk reported back to Lance and Pidge. Lance pumped his fist in the air.
Yes! I love being enabled!
There's a maintenance door in the back that way, Pidge said. If we can get around behind the exhibits, we could find something to hide until night. There doesn't seem to be a lot of guards around, so it'll be pretty easy to stay hidden. And that's what they did. Just before closing time, they silently slipped into the maintenance door and located the hall that opened into the exhibit's access doors. They walked for a little while before finding a small, out-of-the-way supply closet and stuffed themselves inside. Pidge and Lance passed the time in deep conversation about benign topics, video games, movies, and even a little bit of politics. Hunk's thoughts turned to Earth, too. Revelation seemed to have sparked that feeling in all of them. He hadn't heard Lance talk so openly about Earth stuff in a long time, but having a part of it here now seemed to have opened up something inside of all of them. It made Hunk miss it. He hadn't really realized how much until now. He missed what it felt like to be there, looking up at the unknown. Now he was in the unknown, looking up for something familiar, and not finding it. Maybe this would change that feeling. After a few hours had passed, they decided the coast was clear, and clambered as silently as possible out of the closet. Hunk turned on his communicator and called Keith.
"How's it going over there?"
he asked. "Pretty boring, actually," Keith said, and Hunk could hear the muffled sound of a band in the background. "I'm not saying I want someone to rob the place, but if I have to have another conversation about cheese making, I'm actually going to die."
Wow, Hunk thought. Turns out awkward fancy dinner talk is pretty much a universal constant.
He laughed.
"Well, it's pretty uneventful over here, too. We're just heading out now to get all up in Revelation."
"Crack open that boy," Lance said.
"That's definitely not the expression,"
Pidge said with a grin.
"Be careful with it, by the way,"
Keith urged at Lance's words.
"I know what I said before, but the thing is, super valuable."
"What do you think we're gonna do, Mom?"
Lance teased.
"Play catch with it?"
"That's totally feasible," Keith responded. "You guys are the classic trio. Hunk is the looks, Pidge is the brains, and you're the wild card. I don't pretend to know what goes on in your head."
Hunk laughed, but Lance looked confused. Hunk was going to have to work on Keith's joke delivery.
"It's a joke,"
he mouthed. Lance shrugged. "Well, I know how valuable it is, so don't worry." Lance turned on his heel and walked down the hallway towards the back of the exhibit, Pidge following suit.
"We'll keep you updated," Hunk said, "but we'd better go."
"All right.
See you."
He hung up, but the ensuing silence was immediately filled with the sound of running. Lance and Pidge were barreling down the maintenance hall, wearing twin looks of shock.
"Dude!"
Lance gasped.
"It's gone! They're all gone!"
Before Hunk could ask any questions, Lance had him by the wrist and was dragging him along behind him. Pidge threw open the access door to the Revelation exhibit, but it was opened on an empty room. Hunk stumbled through the door and looked over the glass into the room beyond, and even through the dark, he could see enough to make his blood run cold and his heart kick into overdrive. All the exhibits were empty. Now the strange quietness of the gala made sense. The thieves weren't after the artifact at the gala at all. They were after everything else in the museum. And Revelation was gone.